Hey, good afternoon. Sorry we are experiencing another COVID issue this week, that we are going to be separated and not able to be together. I don't like this at all, and I'm going to be missing seeing you. And I know this isn't the same as doing something in person, but we are doing the best we can in regards to bringing you some kind of a spiritual feeding during this time of separation. As I know that we're going to be gone maybe the next couple of weeks, I thought about something I saw the other day. It was a little lesson titled Lost Boys. And I don't know if it was specifically about this particular section, but I think it was. But I just like the title. And so we're going to be doing two different lessons, one this week on the first part of this section of the chapter, or section of the text. And then we are going to be doing the next part on the next one. And then I don't know if we'll be meeting together in 3 weeks or if we'll still be away from each other for another week. But we'll have a couple of weeks here that it'll be kind of similar. Both will be from Luke chapter 15. You know this text. You've heard it many times. And I do apologize as I'm outside. I thought maybe the lighting would be a little bit better. It is a little bit breezy. I do have a microphone on that'll help a little bit with the breeze. But hopefully you'll be able to hear me and understand me. But again, we miss seeing you, or I miss seeing you, and we'll miss being together. Again, Luke 15, starting in verse 11, we'll be going through verse 24, I believe, and then the second part will be going from 25 on, looking at this. Again, you've heard this many times. It's the parable of the lost son. But again, in this parable, there's two sons. And so as I was thinking about the idea of when I saw the title, Lost Boys, and that's where it came from. So let's get into the text. I know you've all been lost before, and as we think about the idea of lost, there's so many connotations to that. From the idea of, one person being lost to losing a piece of equipment that you have. And as we think about that, let's get into this text, as I said already. It says in Luke chapter 15, and again, starting in verse 11, it says, "There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me.' And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of the country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate." Now as we look through that, I want us to kind of go through that text a little bit and discuss a little bit about that. Now the idea that the son was kind of like typical teenagers, I would think, or even young adults. They are kind of ready to get out of the parents, from underneath the parents' wings. We've all kind of been there. I remember I was about 21 or going to be turning 21, and I remember being ready to be outside of my parents' wings, if you will, and be ready to be on my own. And the son obviously is at a point where he feels like he probably can handle it. A lot of guys and a lot of girls are able to get into that point and they feel like they can handle it, but essentially they realize they can, and that's what this son did eventually. But it says not many days later he gathered all he had and he took a journey to a faraway country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. Now I looked at several different texts, because I was thinking, well, which one do I want to use? And I chose this one. This is the English Standard Version. But I had never really realized verse 14. The idea that there was a famine that came about in that land. Imagine what happens, or maybe you've had a situation, I know I have, in which a situation comes about that you've done something and then all of a sudden something else comes as a result of that. Sometimes we call it karma. The idea that maybe we didn't plan or didn't expect something based on our decisions to happen next. You know, maybe it's a bad attitude and then you turn around and you trip over something. But then in this case, whatever it is, and of course Jesus is telling a story, and so he can create anything he wants, as this is not a true event, but it's there to tell the truth, a truth in regards to a parable. But the idea that he goes and he spends everything. He squandered everything, and then as a result of that, then a famine comes, or as chance comes about, coincidence, a famine comes. And so then there's not much food around. There's not much abilities to be able to come up with food. It's kind of like when we had this whole COVID situation, the whole toilet paper issue was there, and so we ran out of toilet paper in many places because people were hoarding it, or they were wanting to get it because they were worried about the shortage of that. And so the idea that here he gives up all that he has, he basically parties it away, and then something else happens. Well, if you want to call it karma, you can call it karma. But the idea of a famine comes about. And again, I never really realized that it went on. And then, of course, because of the famine, then he becomes in need. He obviously, there's a food shortage, and he also has a money shortage because he's squandered everything he had. And so he went out and he finds a job. Now, that's obviously a good thing. He finds a job. But obviously he's sent into the fields to take care of pigs. Now, if you didn't know, pigs were considered what was called a dirty animal to the Jews. They had that split hoof. And so the idea that they were considered a dirty animal. And so the idea that here he is, a Jew, going to work with some pigs, that obviously is more of a lesson that Jesus is trying to show, that he is willing to go to any depth in order to be able to get his money. He's willing to go to the utter depths of the earth, or not depths of the earth, depths of his humility, there to be humbled in order to be able to make money. And so he was longing to be fed. And as he was looking at those pigs and probably looking at that food that he was giving them, the idea that here he's thinking back to his father's servants and how they had plenty of food all the time. You know, servanthood is not always the greatest thing, but at the same time, you know, slavery, they made sure that those slaves and those servants did have food. And so even when we were looking at the idea of those in Exodus, they were complaining of going into that wilderness because they were used to having food, and here out in the wilderness they didn't have food. And so he comes to his senses and he finally realizes, hey, I need to go home. But I think he's kind of nervous to go home. And so he eventually goes home. He even practices and rehearses what he's going to say to his dad, because he's probably concerned about what his dad's going to say. He's probably thinking, I'm going to get a lecture. You know, you never know exactly what's going to happen, especially when you've done wrong, and especially when you've done wrong, in this case, by making this mistake. And so he goes home after he's practiced what he's going to say, and his dad sees him from a long way off. Is his dad crossing his arms? Is he going like this? And is he like looking? Is he giving him the look? So now you're coming back to me? Now that you've lost everything? Now that you need money, you're again coming back after I gave you your inheritance? No, that's not at all what he did. But that's probably what he's worried about. That's probably what he's thinking he's going to get. And I'm sure when you were a kid, you probably thought something similar whenever you did something wrong. You were going to hear about it. Or maybe as a parent, maybe your kids were a little bit nervous coming to you whenever they did something wrong, and they knew they were in the wrong, and that guilt just overwhelms them, and here they are thinking they're going to maybe get a little bit of a lesson, even if it's a life lesson or a teachable moment type situation. The idea that they might be feeling that guilt and thinking they're going to get that lesson from them. But instead, no, the Father does the opposite. He does the exact opposite. In other words, now he runs out and he embraces him. And those of you as parents know what that's like. You appreciate, you love your kids, even when they make mistakes. You might have said, if you've been like me and you've said, I may not always like the choices you make, but I will always love you. And it's easier to be saying that and knowing that about your kids than it is to be receiving that. At least it is for me. And I'm sure that this son was thinking, okay, I need to rehearse this. I need to say this. And he does say it, but the dad doesn't care. The dad doesn't care about what he has to say. He knows his son, and he appreciates the fact that he is now found. He was lost and now found. Of course, it was in a time in which they didn't have communication like we do now. And so he was not able to put in a quarter like we used to back in the 80s and even 90s into a machine and call home and say, Dad, I'm coming home. But he just had to make that long journey home. And I don't know how far it was, how many days, but of course he had to use whatever abilities he had to feed himself on that journey. But the idea that he came home and his dad was there waiting. And the illustration is to point out the fact that even when we squander ourselves off, whether it's we squander our faith and we just live in a time of sin, even a time of doubting sin, the idea that God is there. He doesn't care, what is going on. He knows our heart, and that's what he's after. He wants our heart as we come back to him and as we appreciate what he is there, what he is providing for us. It's okay to come back. Maybe you need to come back in your faith. It may not be the fact that you need to come back to a church time. Maybe you've already done that. But still your faith is, maybe something is going on in your life and you're thinking, man, I need just to have that reassurance that God is there, that God still loves me. Maybe you've had a bad father figure, or maybe no male figure in your life. And so you have a battle with that, a personal battle, to understand exactly what it's like to know how somebody could love you, even in the midst of mistakes. But no matter what, know that God the Father loves us, and he enjoys us coming back to him. And so I want to encourage you to know that no matter what we do, even if people are gossiping about us, even if we are put in jail, even if we are on death row, the idea that God still loves us. He still wants us to come back to him. And maybe it might be that 11th hour. And some people may doubt the fact that you are sincere if it is the 11th hour. And that's what we'll look at next week with the other son. The son that was still at home. But are you lost? Maybe you've been found. The idea that even if you have been found, appreciate that and enjoy that. And enjoy the love of the Father. But if you're lost, come home, my friend. Whatever it may be. You can leave a comment on here if you need to, or you can get a hold of me through this page or through this video. But if you're one of the ones that I am ministering with, hey, let me know if you need something. To know that even though you are lost, even if you are a baptized person and you are still maybe going off on the wayward side, that maybe you need to be found. Maybe you need some encouragement. But whatever your need is, know that God is there. Hey, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great week. God bless.